He saved alien girl from eating mud years later. Her dead mother rang his doorbell. It existed on the edge of mapped space, where refugees drifted and forgotten wars left scars no one bothered to heal. Evan only came down because his cargo ship shuddered mid-flight, alarms screaming as one of the thrusters overheated. He cursed softly, steady hands guiding the ship through the thin atmosphere. Dust storms rolled across the surface like slow oceans. He found a flat stretch of cracked ground near a mixed-species settlement and set the ship down as gently as he could. When the engines powered off, silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. Evan exhaled and leaned back in his seat. "Of course," he muttered, "middle of nowhere." He ran a systems check. Repairs would take at least a day, maybe two. He grabbed his jacket, a small med kit, and stepped out into the dry air. The settlement nearby looked temporary, like it was never meant to last. Tents made from patched fabric and scavenged metal were scattered without order. Aliens of different shapes moved slowly between them, some tall and insect-like, others hunched and furred, some so strange Evan couldn't guess where their heads were. No one looked healthy. Hunger hung over the place like a smell. Evan walked carefully, hands visible, making sure he looked non-threatening. Humans were still new to many frontier worlds, and not everyone trusted them. A few aliens glanced at him and looked away. Others stared with tired eyes that had learned not to expect help. He felt that familiar tightness in his chest. He had seen places like this before: war leftovers, corporate mistakes, places where life continued only because it refused to stop. He was about to turn back when he noticed movement near the edge of the settlement, something small. At first he thought it was an animal. Then it stood up, wobbling on thin legs. It was a child. Alien, clearly not human, but young in a way that needed no translation. Her skin was pale blue-gray, stretched tight over fragile bones. Large dark eyes took up most of her narrow face. She wore nothing but a torn cloth wrapped around her middle. Evan stopped walking. The child knelt down, scooping dirt into her hands. Slowly, carefully, she brought it to her mouth and began to eat. Evan's breath caught. "No," he whispered without realizing he'd spoken. He took a step closer. The ground crunched beneath his boots. The child flinched but didn't run. She was too weak. She looked at him with wide eyes, fear and confusion mixing together. Still, she kept chewing the dirt as if stopping might be worse. Evan knelt several steps away so he wouldn't scare her. He moved slowly, like approaching a wild animal. "It's okay," he said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand his words. "You don't have to eat that." The child tilted her head slightly, watching him. Her stomach made a faint, painful sound. Evan's heart clenched. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed water pouch. He carefully opened it and placed it on the ground between them, then leaned back, giving her space. She stared at it, sniffed the air. Her eyes flicked from the water to Evan and back again. After a long moment, she crawled forward and grabbed it with shaking hands. She drank desperately, spilling half of it down her chin. Evan didn't stop her. When it was empty, she looked at him again, eyes still guarded but less afraid. Evan reached into his pack and pulled out a tube of emergency nutrient paste. Standard human rations. Tasteless but full of everything a body needed to survive. He squeezed a small amount onto a clean patch of metal and slid it toward her. She sniffed it, uncertain. Slowly, she touched it with one finger, then brought it to her mouth. Her eyes widened slightly at the taste. She hesitated, then ate more. Evan stayed perfectly still. He noticed scars along her arms, old ones, signs of sickness, maybe radiation exposure. He wondered how long she had been alone. As she ate, her shoulders slowly relaxed. The shaking lessened. After a few minutes, she stopped and looked up at him again. She made a small sound, not quite a word, more like a question. Evan smiled gently. "My name's Evan," he said, touching his chest. "I won't hurt you." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She watched him closely, then did something unexpected. She pressed one thin hand against her chest and made another sound. Lee-Ra, Evan nodded. Lyra. The name settled into him like something important. Footsteps approached from behind. Evan turned to see two adults from the settlement, their species tall and angular, skin patterned like stone. They spoke sharply to each other, then to the child. Their voices were harsh, impatient. Lyra shrank back, clutching the metal plate with food. Evan stood slowly, raising his hands. "Easy, I'm not causing trouble." One of the adults looked at him with clear annoyance. Through a rough translator device, broken words came through. "Child weak, not ours." Evan frowned. "She's starving." The adult shrugged. "Many starving." That answer hit harder than Evan expected. He looked back at Lyra, who stared at the ground now as if she already knew her worth in this place. Something inside Evan hardened. "She needs help," he said firmly. The adult's expression didn't change. "Resources limited." "She will not last." Evan clenched his jaw. He had heard that sentence before on other worlds in other languages. It always meant the same thing. He crouched again and held out the rest of the nutrient paste toward Lyra. She hesitated, then took it, gripping it like a treasure. Evan turned back to the adults. "I'll take responsibility." They exchanged looks. Finally, one of them nodded. "Human choice." They walked away, already done with the matter. Evan stayed with Lyra as she ate slowly this time. He checked her breathing, her pulse. She was weak but alive, still fighting. He activated his wrist communicator and contacted his ship's AI. "Med scan," he said quietly. "Priority child." A soft hum sounded as the scanner ran. Data streamed across his display. Malnutrition, severe dehydration, exposure-related illness, but no terminal damage. She could recover. Evan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He wrapped her in his jacket to protect her from the cold wind that had started to rise. She stiffened at first, then relaxed when she realized the warmth stayed. She looked up at him, eyes heavy now, exhaustion finally winning. Her hand clutched the fabric of his sleeve. Evan sat on the ground, back against a broken crate, and let her lean against him. He stayed alert, watching the settlement, ready in case anyone objected. No one came. After a while, Lyra fell asleep. Evan looked down at her small form, dirt still on her fingers, scars catching the fading light. Anger simmered under his calm exterior, not at the people here, but at a galaxy that allowed this to be normal. He didn't know who Lyra's parents were. He didn't know her species. He didn't know if helping her would cause problems later, but he knew one thing clearly. Leaving her to eat mud would have broken something inside him. Hours later, a small medical team arrived from a relief ship responding to Evan's emergency signal. They spoke in calm voices, took Lyra carefully, and began proper treatment. One of the medics looked at Evan. "You saved her life." Evan shook his head. "I just showed up." The medic smiled faintly. "That's usually enough." Before they took her away, Lyra woke briefly. Her eyes found Evan immediately. She reached out weakly and touched his hand. She made a soft sound again. Different this time, something deeper. Evan squeezed her fingers gently. "You'll be okay." She was carried into the transport and the doors closed. Evan watched until it disappeared into the dust. He returned to his ship later that night, finished his repairs, and left Kepri 9 at dawn. To him, it was one small act on one forgotten world, something he would remember but not dwell on. What Evan did not know was that Lyra's species did not forget kindness. They recorded it. They bound it to memory and blood. And one day, long after Evan believed that moment had faded into the past, the echo of that choice would return to his doorstep, wearing a face the galaxy believed had been dead. And it would all begin with a doorbell ringing in the quiet dark. Time passed in ways Evan Hale never noticed. He repaired his ship, finished his delivery, and moved on to the next job, then the next world. Kepri 9 became a memory he rarely revisited. In the life of a cargo pilot, there was no space for every face, every small tragedy. If Evan had stopped for each one, he would have never left the ground. But some choices did not fade just because the person who made them moved on. Far from human space, deep within a region marked on most maps as empty, Lyra lived. The place was called a sanctuary, though no outsider would have recognized it as such. It was hidden inside the hollowed interior of a dead moon, its surface left barren on purpose. Beneath layers of rock and shielding fields, an entire civilization existed in silence. Lyra's people were called the Thren. They were tall when grown, slender, with skin that shifted slightly in color depending on emotion and health. Their eyes were large, designed to see in low light, and their minds were built for memory. Too much memory. That was why the Thren were hunted. They remembered wars too clearly. They remembered betrayals too honestly. They remembered kindness in ways that frightened those who ruled the galaxy. As a child, Lyra had nearly died because of that memory, because her people had hidden too well, starved too quietly, and trusted no one. She survived because one human did not follow those rules. Years after Kepri 9, Lyra stood inside a learning chamber, her long fingers moving through streams of floating light. Symbols shifted as she touched them, forming images from the past. Not just recorded history, but felt memory. She saw herself as she had been, small, weak, eating dirt because hunger had erased fear. She felt the warmth of fabric around her shoulders, heard the calm voice she did not understand but somehow trusted. The chamber pulsed softly as the memory ended. Lyra stepped back, breathing slowly. "You return to it again," a voice said. She turned. Elder Serge stood near the doorway, leaning on a staff grown from crystal and bone. His skin was faded, his colors muted by age, but his eyes were sharp. "It is important," Lyra said. Serge studied her for a long moment. "Important, yes, dangerous also." "He saved me," Lyra replied. Her voice was steady, but something strong moved beneath it. "Without knowing who I was, without asking anything." "That is exactly why it is dangerous," Serge said quietly. Lyra folded her hands. "Our law says life debts must be honored. Our law also says we survive by remaining unseen." She did not argue. She did not need to. Serge could see the truth in her posture, in the subtle shift of her skin color. "You will not forget him," Serge said. "No, you will seek him." "Yes," Serge sighed. "Then the debt has already chosen its path." Lyra left the chamber and walked through the sanctuary. Children trained in silence. Engineers repaired systems older than most stars humans knew. Soldiers practiced not with pride, but with fear held tightly under control. The Thren had once been many. Now they were few, hidden, surviving only because the galaxy believed them extinct. Official records stated that the Thren homeworld had been destroyed during a resource conflict decades earlier. Corporate fleets had burned the surface clean, declared the species lost, and moved on. What the records did not say was that the Thren had escaped. Nor did they say that one of their greatest minds had been officially listed as dead. Lyra stopped before a sealed chamber, guarded by layers of security and tradition. Only a handful were allowed inside. Her hand pressed against the door panel. It opened. Inside, surrounded by humming systems and suspended light, stood Mara, Lyra's mother. Mara looked much as Lyra remembered her from early childhood, tall, composed, her skin bright with controlled energy. Only her eyes showed the cost of survival. They held knowledge that no one should have carried alone. "You saw it again," Mara said. "Yes." Mara did not ask which memory, she already knew. "You should not anchor yourself to one human," Mara said. "The galaxy is vast." "That is why he matters," Lyra replied. "He saw one small life and chose it." Mara turned away, looking at the star map floating before her. Human territories glowed faintly at the edge. "Humans are unpredictable," she said. "They act before calculating outcome." "They act when calculation says not to," Lyra corrected. Mara was silent. At last she spoke. "That is why I am still alive." Lyra looked at her sharply. "You never told me." "You were too young," Mara said. "And later it was safer if no one knew." She touched the controls and the map shifted, highlighting old battle lines. When the war came, the Thren had something the galaxy wanted, Mara continued. Not weapons, not resources, understanding. She turned to Lyra. We learned how empathy could be amplified. Not simulated, shared. Lyra's breath caught. That is forbidden. It terrified them, Mara said simply. An army that could feel the lives they erased would no longer obey. Lyra understood now. So they declared us extinct. They tried, Mara said. We hid. And I stayed behind to ensure the secret stayed buried. But you were captured. Yes, Lyra's skin darkened with grief. They hurt you. They failed, Mara replied, because of a human evacuation route. Lyra froze. Human, Mara nodded slowly. A small convoy, poorly armed. Refused to abandon civilians. I redirected the attack, bought them time. And they thought you died. I let them believe it. Lyra felt the pieces connect. The debt. Yes, Mara's gaze softened. Your survival was the second proof. That humans do not turn away when it costs them nothing or everything. Silence filled the chamber. Mother, Lyra said quietly, they are moving again. Mara closed her eyes. I know. Beyond the sanctuary, far beyond Thren space, a coalition formed. Old empires, new powers, united by fear of instability. Species that valued order above compassion. They had found traces, energy signatures, whispered records of Thren technology. Extinction, they decided, had been incomplete. Their fleets began to turn. Back in human space, Evan Hale lived a quiet life on a modest colony world. He flew less now, choosing stability over constant travel. He repaired ships, taught young pilots, drank coffee on his porch in the mornings. He still remembered the blue-gray child sometimes. Mostly at night. He told himself she had survived. He needed to believe that. One evening, as twin suns dipped below the horizon, Evan received a public news broadcast. Another border conflict. Another species declared non-compliant. Another fleet mobilized. He shook his head and turned it off. Somewhere in the dark between stars, Lyra stood before the council of her people. They will not stop, she said. They never do. We cannot reveal ourselves, an elder argued. Exposure means destruction. Silence means extinction, Lyra replied. Mara stepped forward. There is another path. All eyes turned to her. Humanity, Mara said. They are not the strongest, not the most advanced, but they are uniquely dangerous. Dangerous how? Serge asked. They remember individuals, Mara said, and they act on that memory. Lyra lifted her head. One human already acted. The chamber filled with uneasy movement. To reveal ourselves is to risk everything, Serge said. Mara's voice was calm. To do nothing is to lose everything. Silence followed. At last, Serge nodded. The dead is recognized. Lyra felt something ancient shift, something deep in her blood and bones. Preparation began quietly. Paths were calculated, risk measured. A destination was chosen. A small human colony. A simple house. A door with a bell. And a human who once saved a starving child from eating mud without knowing that the galaxy would one day depend on that choice. Far away, Evan Hale slept peacefully, unaware that history was already moving toward his doorstep. The night was quiet on the colony world of Haven's Reach. Evan Hale sat alone in his small kitchen, a cup of cooling coffee forgotten in his hands. Outside the window, artificial stars shimmered across the sky dome, their steady glow meant to calm settlers who missed real skies. Evan barely noticed them anymore. His life had become simple by choice. Wake early, fix ships, teach rookies not to panic when alarms screamed. Go home, sleep. Simple felt earned. A soft chime broke the silence. Evan blinked and looked toward the front door. The doorbell rang again. He frowned. Visitors were rare this late. The colony favored schedules, and unexpected knocks usually meant trouble. He stood slowly, joints complaining, and glanced at the small display beside the door. No image appeared. That's odd, he muttered. He tapped the panel. Still nothing. Either the camera was malfunctioning or whoever stood outside was blocking it completely. Evan felt a prickle of unease but not fear. He grabbed a light jacket and walked to the door. When he opened it, the world shifted. A tall alien woman stood on his porch. She was unmistakably not human. Her form was elegant and controlled, her posture straight despite the long journey that must have brought her here. Her skin held a muted silver-blue tone that shimmered faintly under the porch light. Her eyes were large, dark, and filled with something Evan could not name at first. Sorrow and resolve. Evan froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect that crossed cultures more often than most believed. "Evan Hale," she said in careful, accented standard, "I thank you for answering." His mind raced, training, instinct, years of dealing with strangers. "Can I help you?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. "Yes," she replied, "but first I must apologize." "For what?" "For arriving unannounced, and for being impossible." Evan stared. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" She looked at him closely now, as if searching his face for something. When she spoke again, her voice softened. "No," she said, "but you know my daughter." The words hit him harder than any threat could have. "My daughter," Evan echoed. The woman stepped slightly into the light. "Her name is Lyra." The porch seemed to tilt. Evan's breath caught. The memory surged forward without warning, dust, hunger, small hands shaking as they clutched food, eyes too large for a too thin face. "She's alive?" he asked quietly. The woman nodded. "Because of you." Silence stretched between them. Evan stepped aside slowly. "Please come in." Inside, the house felt smaller than usual. The woman looked around with open curiosity, not judgment. She sat when Evan offered a chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "My name is Mara," she said. "I was declared dead 15 years ago." Evan let out a short, disbelieving breath. "That's quite an introduction." Mara's lips curved slightly. "I imagined so." He poured water for both of them, hands steady through habit rather than calm. "You said Lyra is your daughter. She was alone." "Yes," Mara said. "And she should not have been." Her eyes lowered briefly. "Our failures nearly killed her." Evan sat across from her. "She survived, that's what matters." "To us," Mara replied, "it matters how." She reached into a small device at her side and activated it. A soft projection filled the air between them. Evan saw the scene as if he stood inside it, himself kneeling in the dirt, offering water, wrapping a jacket around a trembling child. The memory was sharper than any recording he had seen before. He felt the emotions layered into it. Fear, relief, trust. He swallowed. "This is a life record," Mara said. "My people preserve moments that alter destiny." "I didn't do anything special," Evan said. Mara looked at him steadily. "That is the most dangerous thing about humans. You believe that." She deactivated the projection. "Lyra remembers you," Mara continued. "Not as a hero, as proof." "Proof of what?" "That kindness exists without calculation." Evan leaned back slowly. "Why are you here, Mara?" Mara's gaze hardened just a little. "Because the galaxy is moving toward another cleansing war." Evan closed his eyes briefly. "It always is. This one will end my people." He opened his eyes. Mara explained then, simply, clearly. She spoke of the Thren, of hiding, of empathy technology that could force those who wielded power to feel the cost of their decisions. She spoke of coalitions that valued order over life. "They are coming," she said. "Soon." Evan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat quietly for a long moment. "And you came to me because," he asked, "because Lyra would not let me choose anyone else." Evan almost smiled. "I'm not a diplomat," he said, "or a soldier. I fix ships." Mara nodded. "You are human," he sighed. "That's not always a qualification." "For this," she said, "it is." She stood. "I'm not asking you to fight, only to open a door." "To who?" "To humanity." The next day, Evan sat in a sterile meeting room surrounded by people who normally never shared space. Military officers, scientists, civil representatives. Security teams watched Mara closely, but she showed no fear. Lyra stood beside her. She was taller now, stronger. Her eyes still held that familiar depth. When she saw Evan, her skin shifted subtly, colors blooming with emotion. "You remember," Evan said softly. "I remember everything," Lyra replied. The meeting stretched for hours. Questions piled up. Risks were weighed, doubts voiced loudly. "This could destabilize the entire region," one official said. "Or save it," another countered. Evan listened, saying little. Finally, he spoke. "She was a child eating dirt," he said simply. The room quieted. No plan, no secret, no strategy matters if that's acceptable. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. Humanity debated as it always did, loudly, messily. But beneath it all, something aligned. When the decision came, it was not unanimous. It rarely was, but it was enough. The first coalition fleet arrived at the edge of Thren space days later. They expected resistance. What they received was a broadcast, not a threat, a memory. Across ships and stations, commanders felt it. Not information, but experience, hunger, fear. A small hand gripping fabric, a choice made without witnesses. Some turned away immediately, others hesitated. A few pressed on. Those who did found human fleets waiting. Not in attack formation, in defense. The standoff lasted hours, then days, then something unprecedented happened. A coalition commander ordered a retreat. Others followed. The war that was meant to erase a species stalled, then collapsed under the weight of shared understanding. Weeks later, Mara stood once more on Evan's porch. "This is not the end," she said. "No," Evan agreed, "but it's a start." Lyra stepped forward and pressed her hand gently over his heart. "The debt remains," she said, "not as obligation, as bond." Evan smiled, eyes tired but warm. "Take care of each other." They left quietly. Life returned to normal as much as it ever did. Evan went back to fixing ships, teaching students, drinking coffee on his porch. But sometimes, late at night, he would hear the echo of a doorbell in his dreams. And he would know that somewhere among the stars, a child who once ate mud was standing tall, because one human chose to stop and kneel instead of walking past. And the galaxy, for now, remembered that choice. The retreat of the coalition fleets did not bring peace. It brought attention. Across the galaxy, news spread faster than any official report could control. Ships had turned back without firing. Commanders had resigned. A species believed extinct had spoken without words and made entire armadas hesitate. That kind of event did not fade. It disturbed balance. On Haven's Reach, Evan Hale felt the change before anyone explained it to him. Traffic increased around the colony. Military transports passed overhead more often. His quiet repair yard received inspections from people who asked careful questions and took too many notes. He did not like it, but he understood it. Humanity had stepped into something larger than itself again. Evan stood beneath the open hull of a freighter, guiding a trainee through a repair. His hands moved automatically, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "Sir," the young pilot said, hesitating, "is it true about the aliens?" Evan tightened a bolt and lowered himself down. "Depends what you've heard." "That humans stopped a war by sharing feelings." The trainee looked embarrassed. "Sounds made up." Evan wiped his hands. "Most true things do at first." The trainee nodded slowly, thinking. That night, Evan received another message. Not a doorbell this time. A secure channel request, authenticated at levels he had never seen tied to his name. He accepted. Mara appeared on the screen, her image steady but her expression grave. "They are reorganizing," she said without greeting. "Who?" "The coalition." "Not as one force, as many smaller ones." Evan leaned back in his chair. "That's worse." "Yes. They learned," he continued, "just not the lesson we hoped for." Mara inclined her head. "They believe empathy can be weaponized, controlled, they want it." Evan exhaled slowly. "And you?" "We are divided," she said. "Some wish to hide again, others wish to trust humanity fully." Evan was quiet for a moment. "And Lyra," Mara's expression softened, "she believes hiding will only delay extinction." "That sounds like her." "Yes." The transmission ended, leaving Evan staring at a dark screen. Across Thren's sanctuary space, tension grew like a living thing. Councils met daily. Arguments sharpened. Old fears resurfaced. Lyra stood before the council again, her posture straight, her voice clear. "They will not forget us now," she said, "no matter how deep we hide." "And standing openly invites annihilation," an elder countered. "Not if we change the terms," Lyra replied. Serge watched her closely. "You mean aligning fully with humanity?" "Yes." Murmurs filled the chamber. "They are not ready," one voice said. "They are divided," another argued. "So are we," Lyra answered. "Yet we still exist." Mara stepped forward. "Humans are already involved, whether they accept it or not." Silence followed. At last Serge raised his staff. "Then we choose movement over stagnation." The decision was made. Humanity did not receive a formal declaration. They received refugees, small ships at first, then larger convoys. Thren vessels emerging from places no map recorded, requesting asylum in human space. The response was chaotic. Some worlds welcomed them. Others protested loudly. Political channels overflowed with debate, but ships were not turned away. Evan watched one of the first convoys arrive at Haven's Reach. He stood among civilians as sleek alien vessels settled into orbit, their hulls marked by age and restraint rather than war. Beside him, a woman whispered, "They look fragile." Evan nodded. "They are. That doesn't mean they're weak." Lyra arrived days later. She did not announce herself. She simply walked into Evan's repair yard one morning, sunlight catching the subtle shifts of her skin. Evan looked up from an engine and smiled. "You've grown," he said. "So have you," she replied, studying the lines time had added to his face. They walked together along the yard. "The coalition won't stop," Evan said. "No," Lyra agreed. "But neither will we." Human scientists worked with Thren researchers carefully, cautiously. The empathy-sharing technology was not deployed widely. It was studied, limited, treated like a fragile thing that could either heal or harm. Some humans feared it, others volunteered. What surprised the galaxy was how many chose to experience it willingly. Soldiers, medics, politicians. They felt hunger that was not theirs, fear that was not theirs, hope that survived anyway. Not everyone changed. Enough did. The coalition fractured further. Some factions withdrew entirely, unwilling to fight humans who would not dehumanize them. Others doubled down, labeling empathy manipulation as psychological warfare. Skirmishes broke out on the edges of space. Not large wars, sharp, ugly conflicts. Human ships did not pursue destruction. They pursued protection. Evan found himself speaking more often than he wanted to. Interviews, testimonies, panels. He told the same story every time. "I saw a kid eating dirt," he said, "and I had food." Some listeners dismissed it as emotional manipulation. Others listened harder. One night, alarms sounded across Haven's Reach. Coalition raiders had slipped through patrol lines, aiming for a refugee transport still docking. Evan was already moving before orders reached him. Years of flying, of reacting without panic, took over. He boarded a small defense craft alongside trained pilots half his age, space filled with sharp light and movement. The raiders were fast, desperate. They targeted engines, not weapons. Evan's craft took a hit. Systems flickered. "Stay on them," he said calmly. The enemy ship hesitated when human vessels placed themselves between it and the refugee transport. It fired anyway. Human shields absorbed the impact. The raider broke formation and fled. Later, as emergency crews worked, Evan stood watching the refugee ship complete its docking. Through the viewport, he saw Thren families holding each other alive. Lyra joined him quietly. "They could have destroyed us," she said. "They chose not to," Evan replied. "That matters," she looked at him. "You believe this will work. I believe it's worth trying." Weeks turned into months. The galaxy did not become peaceful, but it changed direction. Coalition leaders who ordered extermination campaigns found their crews unwilling. Empathy memories spread beyond control, copied, shared, leaked. The cost of cruelty became harder to ignore. Mara stood before a joint human-Thren assembly and spoke plainly. "We do not offer perfection," she said, "only connection." Humanity did not claim moral superiority. They claimed responsibility. Evan watched it all from the edges, uncomfortable with attention, proud despite himself. One evening, as he sat on his porch again, Lyra joined him. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Stopping that day," he said. She nodded. He thought for a moment. "No. I regret that it was rare." Lyra smiled softly. Far away, coalition fleets still gathered. But now, when orders came to a race, many hands hesitated, because somewhere in their minds lived a memory that was not theirs. A human kneeling in the dirt. A choice made without witnesses. And the quiet understanding that once you feel another life as your own, some doors can never be closed again. The galaxy did not change in one dramatic moment. It changed slowly, unevenly, like a great ship turning its course with engines that had never been meant for gentleness. Coalition forces still existed. Fear still existed. Power still tempted those who believed control was the same as safety. But something fragile and stubborn had taken root, and it refused to die. On Haven's Reach, Evan Hale continued his quiet work. He fixed ships damaged by skirmishes that never made the news. He trained pilots who had grown up hearing that humans were strange because they cared too much. He listened more than he spoke. People still came to him asking why he had helped an alien child all those years ago, as if they expected a clever answer. "I was there," he always said. "She was hungry." For many, that answer was unsettling. For others, it became grounding. The largest confrontation came not with weapons but with truth. A coalition summit was called on neutral ground, not a battlefield, not a throne world. A simple orbital station built for trade, now repurposed for survival. Humanity was invited. So were the Thren. Many believed it was a trap. Mara believed it was inevitable. "If they plan violence, they will reveal themselves," she said calmly. "If they plan peace, they will be afraid." Lyra stood beside her, steady and composed. "And if they plan control," Mara met her eyes, "then they will fail." Evan was not meant to attend. He had no rank, no title, no authority, but Lyra requested him. So he sat at the far edge of the chamber while leaders spoke in careful language, wrapped in tradition and threat. Accusations were exchanged. Demands were made. "Empathy transmission violates sovereign autonomy," one coalition representative said. "Extermination violates existence," Mara replied. Voices rose, tempers sharpened. Then something unexpected happened. A coalition delegate stood. He was old, his species slow-moving, his eyes clouded by years. His voice trembled, but not with fear. "I experienced the broadcast," he said, "not as command, as accident." The chamber stilled. "I felt the hunger," he continued, "the smallness, the terror of being unseen." He looked around the room. "We told ourselves extinction was mercy, efficiency." His gaze dropped. "It was convenience." Silence spread, heavy and uncomfortable. Others spoke then, not all in agreement, not all ready to surrender power, but enough to fracture the illusion of unity that had driven annihilation before. No treaty was signed that day, but something more important occurred. The order to exterminate the Thren was formally withdrawn. Across known space, fleets stood down. Not all, but enough. The war that should have been inevitable faded into a long, tense ceasefire. History would later struggle to name it. On Haven's Reach, life settled into a new rhythm. Thren refugees built homes beside human ones. Their children learned human words and Thren memory songs. Differences caused friction, misunderstandings, frustration, but also laughter. Evan watched it from his porch, coffee warm in his hands, listening to unfamiliar voices become familiar sounds. Lyra visited often. Sometimes they talked about the future. Sometimes they talked about nothing at all. "You never asked what became of the people who ignored me," she said once. Evan shrugged. "I don't need to know," she studied him. "Most species would." "Most species didn't kneel," he replied simply. Time continued. The empathy technology was never weaponized. Humanity refused to allow it. Instead, it became regulated, limited to voluntary use, carefully guided. A bridge, not a blade. Some accused humans of hypocrisy. Others accused them of weakness. Humanity accepted both. Years later, a monument was proposed, not by humans, by the Thren. It was meant to be placed on a major trade route, visible to thousands of passing ships. When Evan saw the design, he was uncomfortable. "It's too much," he said. The monument did not depict him as a hero. It showed no face, no name, only a simple scene, a human kneeling, an alien child reaching for offered food. Below it, a single inscription translated into dozens of languages. "This is where the war turned." Evan attended the unveiling reluctantly, standing in the back, hands in his pockets. Mara spoke briefly. So did human representatives. Lyra said nothing. She simply placed her hand against the monument and closed her eyes. The memory spread quietly, not as force, but as reminder. Across the galaxy, stories changed. Children learned that humans were dangerous not because they conquered, but because they remembered individuals when systems demanded statistics. Military academies added new case studies. So did medical schools. Even corporate boards reluctantly began to teach risk through empathy rather than numbers alone. Not everywhere, not always, but enough. One evening, long after the monument had faded into routine travel scenery, Evan heard a familiar sound. A doorbell. He smiled before opening the door. Lyra stood there, older now, her presence steady, her eyes carrying both sorrow and hope. "It's quiet," she said. "For now," Evan replied. She stepped inside, looking around the small house she had visited many times. "My people are rebuilding," she said, openly. "That's good. They will stumble. So will humans," she nodded. "The debt is fulfilled." Evan shook his head gently. "No debts," she smiled. "Then a bond." They stood in comfortable silence. Outside, the artificial stars dimmed as night deepened. Somewhere far away, conflict still brewed, fear still whispered, power still tempted. But also somewhere a child would be fed. And someone would stop walking. Evan Hale never became famous. His name appeared in no major historical record. But among the Thren, and quietly among humans too, a simple truth endured. Galaxies were not saved by weapons alone. Sometimes they were saved by a moment of attention, a kneel in the dirt, a hand offering food, and a choice so small it seemed forgettable.